Good morning, Garland Nixon here, and we've got some news. We've got some new news on the Slovakia shooter. We're going to talk about Ukraine being NATO's mercenary army, and of course, the tragedy of the death of the Iranian leader. Let's talk. Good morning, Garland Nixon here. There's lots of news going on, and we're going to start on a Monday morning right here. I think it is important. Now, here's the key, and I'm a firm believer in this. Let's not get too far over our skis, as they say. You know, as soon as something happens, people automatically come up with a resolution to it. You know, this is what has happened. This is where we are. You know, they know all the backgrounds, everything. Let's do this. My dad used to say this: measure 1,000 times, cut once. Before you come to a conclusion of what happened, continue to look at all of the indicators, all the information you can find, and then at some point, when you are sure, take a position. I've been like this. You know, things will happen, and people say, "Okay, this is what happened. This is who was behind it. This is what's going on." Immediately, as soon as something happens, within seconds, well, we know how that happened. What ends up happening is this: sometimes you end up looking like a fool because you come out and you're like, "Yeah, we know what it was. It was this," and later on, people find out it wasn't. And then something else comes up and you're immediately, yeah, we know who was behind it. It was this group. And people find out where it wasn't. And at some point you have no credibility. You're known as a knee-jerk reactionary person who simply, when somebody says what happens, you don't use your critical thinking skills, which involves deductive reasoning, which involves the intake of data. So you can reason. So let's not get ahead of let's start putting together the data. Let's start like an investigator. I told you I was an investigator. Or in investigations. And I'm telling you, I've seen idiots who are investigators who started with a conclusion. Well, I know this guy did it. And then they did an investigation to show that the guy did it, rather than an investigation to find out who did it. And at some point, it was like clear and obvious. It was clear and obvious the guy didn't do it. And some of these people would still try to push that investigation because they were, at that point, emotionally connected to that outcome. If that outcome didn't happen, they look bad because they'd made that conclusion. Very important that I start off with that before I go to my first story. Very important. All right, let's start with our first article. And it's a big article. Let's not go too far with it, but let's take it for what it's worth and see what we got. Slovak PM, Prime Minister Fico's attacker, may not have acted alone. Okay, one thing we know about people online, and that is they read the basically, people read the headline and not the story. That makes you very susceptible to propaganda. The people who are involved in propaganda know that all they have to do is put out an article with a hot headline and everybody will go, "Oh, I know what it is now." They didn't read the story. So we're going to read the story, and we're not going to get out over our skis and say, "We know who is behind it." We don't yet know anything. But let's see what we got. And we're going to start putting together data over the course of days, maybe even weeks, maybe even months. And at some point, I believe the picture will come clear. Maybe it won't, but we're not going to jump out and just say, "We know who did it." We may have our suspicions, but there could be, even if there is some nefarious entity behind it, it could be numerous nefarious entities, right? Let's see what we got here. The suspect in an assassination attempt on Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico may not have been just a lone wolf, as previously believed. There were many of those who suspected in the beginning that he wasn't a lone wolf, right? As many believed, as the mainstream media pushed. But we don't know. We don't know. Okay. The Interior Minister and Security Services try to shed light on an attack that sent shockwaves through Europe. Okay. Fista is no longer in immediate danger, but still in serious condition after being hit by bullets. Okay. Here's interesting. The incident has highlighted the deep polarization of politics in the Central European country of 5.4 million people. Well, here's how polarized the politics are. He just won. He won. Isn't it interesting that in a country where a guy wins, where we hear from people, we love democracy. We're all about democracy. Democracy is the way it is. We're here to support democracy. All right, this guy won an election. Well, I don't know how valid he is as a leader. They support democracy only when it works for them, and not even real democracy. They support using the word democracy to get their ending, whatever it wants. So here's a guy who won an election, goes to charge, and it gets in charge, and the mainstream media, i.e., e.g., however you want to put it, the U.S. intelligence system and the U.S. State Department, but I repeat myself, says it's deeply divided and polarized. When it ain't all that divided and polarized, the guy just friggin' won. But let me continue. But that tells you where these people are. Let's keep going. Interior Minister, whatever his name is, said an investigation team had been set up. They're going to look into whether the guy acted alone or other people. But here's interesting. Here's where we go. Listen to this. That's why I got to read the whole story. One factor suggesting the involvement of other persons was that the suspect's internet communications were deleted 2 hours after the assassination attempt. But he was arrested at the scene of the crime. I'm guessing that the intelligence agents and law enforcement officials that arrested him didn't say, oh, by the way, let me give you your phone back. Probably your phone couldn't even do it. Probably your computer. Let me let you access all of your system so that you can delete stuff. I'm guessing if it was after his arrest, the likelihood is he didn't do it. What does it say? One factor suggesting the involvement of other persons was that the suspect's internet communications were deleted 2 hours after the assassination attempt, but not by the suspect and most likely not by his wife. This indicated, quote, the crime may have been committed by a certain group of people, right? Okay. Here's the thing about the look at, let's talk about that a little bit. Okay. So, What happened? What data do we have now? Let's go with our data sets. Numero uno, prime minister shot. Number two, it's by a 70-some-year-old poet guy who we call him a poet because he writes poetry. I don't even know if poetry is any good. He doesn't do that for a living because apparently he can't make enough money selling poetry to make a living. So he was like a security guard somewhere, which means the guy ain't setting the world on fire economically. And so he goes out and throws a bunch of rounds at the prime minister trying to kill him. We know that this guy had been at protests apparently against the prime minister, that he disagreed with his position at least on the Ukraine conflict. We know that about the guy. So that's what we know so far about the shooter. We know he was arrested on the scene. He didn't appear to have any escape plan at this point. We don't know, but we know that he shot, bam, bam, bam. He got grabbed and he got pulled in. Okay. Now, what's the new piece of information that we have and why is it consequential? The new piece of information that we have is that after his arrest, someone, what do we know? Number one, had access to his online communication abilities. Someone did that. Whoever it was went in, and as they say, they deleted his internet communications. So whoever had access to this guy's online stuff apparently didn't want anyone to know who he was talking to. Or what was being said. More likely two things, probably. who he was being talking to and what was being said in that conversation, right? Now let's go with two possibilities there. Possibility one is the person wasn't involved and they were afraid they were going to be implicated. Let's say you and I are chatting back and forth, and I'm like, hey, I sure hate that Garland, and you're like, I hate Garland too. Garland's a jerk. He sure is. And it's like, man, I wish Garland was dead. And you write, yeah, me too, right? And then I didn't even know you were going to do it, but you go out and kill Garland. Now, it is possible that I could say, or shoot at him and try to kill him, that I could say, holy crap, if anybody sees that, they're going to think I was involved. And I wasn't. And I go in and let's say for whatever reason you allow me to get into your internet stuff, I get rid of it because I don't want to be implicated and I didn't do it. That's one possibility. Because we have to do this intellectual exercise, I want to inject all possibilities that I can think of. That's one possibility. We can talk about the likelihood of that. Doesn't seem logical. It doesn't seem logical. Here's the hole in that theory. If I'm communicating with you and we're talking back and forth, and at some point you go out and make an assassination attempt on Garland, and I don't want anybody to know it, how do I get access to your communication stuff? How do I get your passwords? I mean, how many people do you know that you talk friends, significant others, boyfriends, girlfriends, old friends, new friends, whatever, right? That people have that they talk back and forth and say things. I sure hate Biden. I sure hate Trump. I sure hate whatever, right? Okay, that happens. No doubt about it. But how many of those friends have your passwords so they can get into your computer and delete your stuff? They could get into their computer and delete their stuff and delete their tracks. Oh my God, I don't want anybody to know I was talking to Garland because he went out and he tried this. But how many could get into yours? So the hole in that, I mean, it is a possibility that somebody did it because they were afraid they were going to be implicated, but it's not logical to believe that that is a viable conclusion to come to, because that would mean that some friend or acquaintance had the passwords and info to get in to the shooter's computers. So we've come to a big, the other being, of course, that there's others. The other being, of course, that he was working with some people, maybe at least one, but maybe more, and they were planning this out. And when it all went down, the group of people, somebody in their team went in and erased all of his stuff. Last but not least, it could be intelligence community, and and maybe he had some front people that was talking to him that maybe he didn't know was intelligence. Think about that. And they were all scheming together as though they were just people that hated the prime minister. And when it was all said and done, the intelligence people could get into anybody's stuff. They had everything of his hacked anyway. So once this happened, the hackers, the intelligence community just went in and wiped what they needed wiped. Interesting stuff here. We don't know. We're going to wait for more information. From the beginning, I was very suspicious of it. I'm still very suspicious. Anytime the leader of a country dies, particularly someone who NATO didn't like, the US, the MI6 didn't like, the CIA didn't like, the whole Five Eyes hated, because he wouldn't go along with the Ukraine and various other scams of theirs. Anytime he was hated by the US empire's intelligence community and he gets shot, you would be remiss if you did not consider the potential for foul play. You would also be remiss if you did not consider the potential that there wasn't foul play involved. So we got to consider both. We're waiting for more information. We're not going to come to a conclusion. We're not going to just say we know what it was. It was the CIA, it was MI6, it was blah 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 blah. Keep an eye out, put these things together. But I would say that as the information we have 2 hours after his arrest, someone other than him or his wife went in and started deleting his internet communications definitely points to, it strongly suggests that others were involved, some kind of a network. And I could make an argument that maybe it suggests intelligence operatives, but I would think they'd be smarter than that, but they're not always smarter than that. They're not always smarter than that. Somebody might have forgot to erase something. They do stupid stuff. So let's keep that open. Let's keep an eye on it. But the other thing, I think this is a factor that you have to take into account. And that is that I'm seeing this in U.S. News and World Report. U.S. News and World Reports. So I'm always a bit suspicious of anything I read in the mainstream media. That doesn't mean that it's not true or it is true. I'm just suspicious. That's just another data point. Take into account where you saw it. But we don't know anything yet. We're going to keep watching. Things look real suspicious, don't they? Real suspicious at this point. I put it like this. If you're asking me the direction that I'm leaning towards he wasn't by himself. Now, I'm leaning my spider senses immediately, my as they say, my spider senses. If you say, what's the first thing you felt? What's the first word that came into your mind? It was Ukraine. That was the first word that came into my mind. When he's shot, when now things are looking suspicious. And you have to, because you have to look at Daria Dugina. You have to look at the assassination attempts. You have to look at Crocus City Hall. You have to look at these various assassinations and the guy Tatarsky, right? You look at the Ukrainian intelligence that have been involved or implicated, at least, in outrageous assassination attempts, and terrorist acts against Russia, in outrageous statements against anyone who they don't like or who doesn't go along with their ideological bend, right? The statements they've made, the actions they've taken, makes it clear that you can't put anything against them. Could it have, if in fact there was some intelligence operatives involved, could it have been Western intelligence? Sure, certainly could have been Western intelligence. If there was intelligence involved, my first thought, my first suspect would be the Ukrainian intelligence operation. That being said, you still have to ask yourself, how independent is the Ukrainian intelligence people from the U.S. intelligence? Again, questions that we don't have an answer to, but let's keep this stuff open. Let's stick a pin, as they say in this one, and let's continue to get more info. Now, let's move on to the next one. I think this is a big story. Another big story. And those two, I think it can be inextricably linked. World shaken by the death of Iran's Raisi as Gaza war continues. Fierce fighting continues. Okay. Let me find it here. Well, they don't have much on that, do they? Let's go with, we'll find it. Give me a second. That link didn't work very well. There we go. Iran helicopter crash updates. President Raisi and the foreign minister die. Okay, so that's what we got now. And that is important. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the potentials and the possibilities. So apparently there were 3 helicopters in a convoy. Apparently one of the helicopters had the president and the prime minister in it, and they were heading somewhere, wherever. Okay. They were in the mountains in Azerbaijan, my understanding is. There was extremely bad weather, and one of the helicopters went down. We don't know the details of it. A couple of notes on that. Number one, having been a person who's flown in helicopters before, when I was, I had our aviation section under me in law enforcement at one point. We had two helicopters that flied, a Hughes and a Bell Jet Ranger that flew regularly, and I would go up in the helicopters. Here's the thing about helicopters: they scare the living bejesus out of me, because it always feels like, you know, you're ready to crash. It feels like you're standing up on a ladder, you know, 1,000,000 feet high looking down. They're horrifying to me. They're very, very scary, but I used to have to fly in a helicopter, right? And I'd use it for transportation sometime if I was going from point A to point B. So I can tell you this, having done a lot of boating, apparently there was what we call a whiteout, snow, right? So a whiteout in a boat, if you're in a boat, if you're out on the water, fog, you can't see your hand in front of your face. You know, I've been out in the fog where you can't see nothing. And I don't care what your speed is, it looks like you're sitting still. So fog just puts you like in the middle of nowhere in space. You can't see what's coming, right? Helicopters, if you're flying in a helicopter, I was a hovercraft pilot, same kind of thing. Snow gives you the same effect. It's a white, they call it a whiteout because you can't see anything. Can't see anything. Now, of course, if you're on a helicopter, you're going to be flying by electronics. So you should have your altimeter, you should have all that kind of stuff. The problem is in a mountainous region, right? When you're flying, your altimeter may give you your height above sea level, but it doesn't tell you if there's a mountain in front of you necessarily that's above sea level. So your altitude is X amount of feet, but there's a mountain sitting right here and you're way above sea level. So you can still slap into a mountain. You can descend because there can be a mountain with a plateau or a flat area here, and you can be coming down, down, down. Well, that little flat area or plateau is still 1,000 feet below sea level. So your altimeter tells you you're 1,000 feet up. You're still descending onto a plateau. There's all kinds of horrifying things that can happen when you're in a helicopter, even if you know what you're doing. And once you get a whiteout, once you get snow, it can go bad. So flying in a helicopter is dangerous. Flying in a helicopter in the mountains is dangerous. Flying in a helicopter in the mountains in a whiteout is extremely dangerous. So we cannot eliminate the possibility. One might even argue the probability, I would have to say, if these three factors exist, if in fact the people who perished were in a helicopter, we know that factor exists. If in fact they were in the mountains, we know that factor exists. If in fact it was a whiteout, snow, we're not sure, but we're pretty sure that factor exists. You got to go with that it was an accident first. That doesn't mean it was an accident. That means that is the greatest probability. Now let's go from there. There is also a possibility. One possibility is somebody could have shot it down with a shoulder-fired rocket, right? But keep in mind something. You got this shoulder-fired rocket. You look up, you launch in, or you lock in on your target. You fire this infrared, whatever. Okay, man-pad, they call it, right? Here's the problem. Yeah, you're in a whiteout, so you can't see the helicopter. So how do you look up to see it and lock in? You know what I mean? So even then, it would be hard unless you had something that had radar that could pick it up in the whiteout, you know, something that had the level of electronics necessary to see this thing. It's possible it could have been shot down. Right now, I would argue the probability is that it was an accident. It's possible. However, add this. It was in Azerbaijan. I think Azerbaijan has solid relationships with Iran. I think the fact that Azerbaijan has a strong relationship with Israel and that they have weapons deals wherein Azerbaijan is involved in the manufacturing of weapons, I believe drones, but I'm not 100% sure, with Israel, leads people to suspect that Israel would have the wherewithal inside of Azerbaijan to carry out this type of attack. But at this point, we don't have any information pointing to that. That would just be not fully blind speculation, but it would be speculation. So I don't think we want to go there. We just don't know. Because let me tell you something. As who was it that said Freud, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar? I'm a believer in that. You have to be suspicious But you have to understand that there are times when there are accidents. So one thing I hate in the online community, and that is there are people that will never accept the fact that sometimes in our world things happen. That right now, if the leader of if Putin slipped on a carpet and broke his ankle, they'd be like, we knew it, the CIA was behind it, and they come up with an elaborate scheme, right? That doesn't mean the CIA wasn't behind it, but that doesn't mean also that it isn't foolish and irresponsible every time something happens to pretend before you get any information that you know exactly the cause. It's irresponsible and it is foolish. But we're online. People do that. So it is what it is. Let's continue looking at that. Just like the Slovakian prime minister thing, right? When he first got shot, people were like, oh, it was fill in the blank. And then, what do you think, Garland? And I said, I don't know. I'm waiting for more information, for more data. Am I suspicious? Yeah. Isn't it reasonable to say, even if it weren't some nefarious entity involved, that the Western constant attacks on Slovakian Prime Minister Fica, on Viktor Orban, on people like that, couldn't motivate crazy people to do it? So even if it was, if the U.S. intelligence people or Ukrainian intelligence people weren't involved, it would still be reasonable to say, look, you're always attacking this guy and these kinds of people, and you're going to drive crazy people to do this kind of stuff. So even if they weren't involved, you could make an argument, as does the mainstream media in the US. You could make an argument that their words cause violence. Remember when they went after Tucker Carlson and other people, AOC used this term, I forgot what it was, but what they said was, your words cause violence. These people are dead because of your words. It caused people to hate, fill in the blank, immigrants or whatever, because of Tucker Carlson's words or whoever's words. Therefore, he might as well have killed them. Well, if in fact you hold true to that line of reasoning, which I don't, but let's just say you do, you would have to then say, well, you guys verbally attack Fica all the time. So guess what? If Tucker Carlson's words caused violence towards an immigrant because he talked about immigration, then your words cause violence against Fica because you always put him down and talked about he was some kind of a Russian bot and blah, blah, blah. Right? I think that's a reasonable argument to make. I don't agree that Tucker Carlson or anybody else's words, he didn't say go shoot an immigrant. So to me, that's just a way to go after people who are not with the narrative that you want. I don't agree with Tucker Carlson on some things regarding immigration. I have a different perspective on immigration, a broader perspective that views immigration as an intricate part of imperial foreign policy to both weaken and destabilize regions of the world that have like nice resources that they want, and to introduce immigration into a society to dilute the labor pool and lower wages. Those are things are together. We're going to destabilize your country. Over here, your people are going to come to our country. We'll have more low-wage workers, and we can lower the. Now, who's at fault? Are the immigrants at fault? No, it still comes back to the ruling elite whose actions are causing this. And then they say you should blame the immigrants, bypassing their responsibility for the whole kit and caboodle. At any rate, I say all this to say that, to get back to this, I don't think Tucker Carlson is responsible for immigrants, but I do think that in a world where a war is going on between the US and Russia, involving Ukraine as a mercenary entity, as a political tool, I do think it is arguable. I think it's logically arguable that the constant attacks on Fica, on Orban, could motivate some of these nutcases to go kill him. That being said, I'm not saying all that to say something ain't rotten in Denmark here. Something's real rotten in Denmark. What the hell? The guy goes to jail, and 2 hours after you arrest the suspect, think about that, someone is deleting his online communications specifically. He was talking to someone, and someone was saying things, and someone didn't want anyone to know who he was talking to and what he was saying. Now, I do believe that there are ways for governments to go to servers, and some of the data sometimes is left in servers. And so, but if it's intelligence, then let's say Google, you go to Google to get more information off their servers or something, right? Or WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook, to get more information off of their servers. Well, if it was an intel operation, they're intricately connected to social media, to Google, to internet, online crap out of Silicon Valley. So if it would be very suspicious if not only the information was deleted, but if the Slovakian investigation ran into a brick wall because either the servers at Google or some of these other places wouldn't give them the information they need, or they went to the server and it was gone from there too. So we'll see. It was, as they say, deleted to military specifications, right? Not just deleted off of hard drives, deleted off the servers. That it ain't nowhere to be found. That would indicate a state or intelligence operation. Or intelligence operation, but I guess a state and an intelligence operation, in fact, implies a state operation, doesn't it? So let's keep an eye on that. The Iranian chopper crash. Let's just hit the danger of that real quick. The danger is, worst case scenario would be that we found out that the Israelis were behind it, or let's face it, the U.S. Intelligence, because you know how Blinken and these crazies are. These people are insane. These people are sociopaths. These people, they don't care, right? So right now, based on the data that we have, I argue the probability is that it was just a crash. However, just remember, just like Fista, I started off by saying it appears that this was a lone gunman. I only said anything that said that based on the data that we have. Let's wait for further evidence. That was my position. Now, further information has come out that says I'm turning in a different direction, but I turn like a ship, right? I don't turn like this. Okay, well, we don't know. Aha, I know who it is now. I turn like this. We got a little data. What happens when you turn a ship? You turn the wheel. If you're even running a boat, right? You turn the wheel and you wait, and the boat slowly comes around, right? You turn a ship, right? You turn it and wait, it slowly comes around. So when you go from point A to I don't know to, I think it might be this, make it a slow turn, not too quick. Don't just jump. Oh, I know what it is now. I mean, that's what the online community does. Online community is very responsive. I know what it was. And then like everything that happens, know what it was, no matter what, right? We're not there. We're going to be more responsible. We're collecting our data. Started with Fista. Looks like a lone gunman. More data came out. What do you know? Something's awful funny here about deleting info after the guy's arrested. I think we got something here. So we're going to do the same thing right now. Looks like an accident, but we're going to keep our eyes and ears open, because if it was, my God, if Israel took out the leader of another country, that's casus belli, isn't it? That is, in fact, a declaration of war. How, at that point, does Iran not respond with overwhelming military firepower? Right? How do they not pound the crap out of Israel if Israel slaughtered there? And do they pay back in kind? If in fact, just for a second, if it were Israel or Israel related that took this guy out, that would be number one, they attacked your consulate. Number two, they took out your president and your foreign minister. If that were the case, all of us got a big problem. I'll put it like this: buy some gas and store it in your, in your 5-gallon can that you use for your lawnmower. You might want to get a bigger can because the Middle East is likely to blow up at that point, and you ain't going to be able to get any gas. Oh, by the way, you ain't going to have a job anyway because the economy is going to crash. So bottom line is, let's keep an eye on that. Let's cross our fingers, to be honest, that it wasn't Israeli intelligence or Western intelligence, because that's going to complicate our lives greatly. And the other thing it's going to do is it's going to endanger our lives with World War III and etc. Right? So let's keep an eye on that. Another interesting article we're going to go to, last but not least. This is important. All right. Let me find it. Here we go. All right. And this is Ukraine has become a private mercenary company of NATO to fight against its opponents. This is at Orinoco Tribune. Interesting. Before we really talk about it, a lot of these questions are answered in the first couple of paragraphs, right? I didn't think about this, but it's brilliant. Okay. Ukraine has become a private mercenary company of NATO, which exists only to fight against NATO opponents, said Ukrainian communist and journalist Dmitry Kovalev, whoever, in an interview with Orinoco Tribune. Ukrainian MPs are saying that Ukrainian soldiers will later have to participate in other wars on the U.S. side for today's U.S. assistance. Simply put, they will go wherever the Pentagon sends them to suppress rebellious countries of the global South. Oh, gee. Almost sounds like ISIS. Militarily, the country is also completely dependent on arms supplies from NATO countries, he continued. Without them, the Ukrainian army would not last. In fact, the Russian Federation often emphasized in the media it is fighting a proxy NATO army, Ukraine being only the face of it, right? As for the Ukrainian army, quote, it's up to its neck in debt to the IMF and other Western countries. The country will never be able to pay off these debts. The NATO Secretary General recently said that if Ukraine does not win, there will be no point in rebuilding it. Interesting, isn't it? Hey, we're going to be rebuilding Ukraine. Ukraine can't possibly lose. They're going to win. Can't possibly lose. They're going to defeat the Russians. What happens if they lose? Screw them. You're going to rebuild it? Oh, really? Rebuild it? Yeah, right. I don't think so. We rebuild it. You got to be kidding me. That ain't, look. That ain't what Ukraine was for. That's not what they're for. I'll put it to you like this. When a person goes and buys a sex worker, shall we say, and purchases services from a sex worker, they ain't taking that sex worker home to wine and dine and marry them and take them out to dinner and buy them a new outfit and do all of those things that they would do for someone that they had emotions and feelings and love and camaraderie for. When they purchase the services from a sex worker, after those services has been executed, the sex worker is gone. They may say, I'm going to purchase services for the sex worker to do other things, whatever the case may be. But they ain't whining and dining them. They don't love them. They're just doing what they pay. They're getting a service, right? The U.S. is basically making Ukraine, the country of Ukraine, it's a political tool. It's a sex worker. They purchase Ukraine for a service, and the service is to die. When it's a cannon fodder service. When Lindsey Graham said fight to the last Ukrainian, he gave up the ghost, man. He told everybody the truth. We're buying Ukraine from the oligarchs. And when I say buying Ukraine from the oligarchs, here's what I mean. In the same way that during the feudal system, a feudal lord would buy land and the land came with the peasants and he could do with the peasants as he pleased, right? Those were his peasants. He owned the peasants. I bought a big 5,000 acre farm that grows whatever, and there's X amount of peasants on it working a farm. They're my peasants. I bought them with the farm to do what I want with them, right? Well, when the U.S. empire came in and bought off the oligarchs and bought off the power brokers in Ukraine, the people came with it, just like peasants. And they're like, okay, now that we've paid you and your money's going to keep coming, well, we're going to do whatever we want. The oligarchs said, sure. All right, we need cannon fodder. The oligarchs said, yeah, of course. Yours. They're yours now. Do with them as they please. Just keep that money coming. Keep it coming. So the bottom line is this. That's what it is. The Ukrainian people have been purchased with the land of Ukraine bought from the oligarchs in the same way that a British nobility would purchase land that came with peasants. And when they're finished using the peasants for this, they'll use the peasants for something else. Hey, I need the peasants to shovel snow. Now I need the peasants to cut grass. Now I need the peasants to figure it out. I need the peasants to do things. And that's what peasants' jobs are. So I don't want to hear nothing else about it. They're my peasants. They'll do what the hell I tell them to do, right? What this guy's saying is if another war comes along and they need the Ukrainian peasants for the other war, they pay it for them. They're their peasants. They'll use them, right? Let's continue. He also noted that due to draconian conscription laws, a large percentage of Ukrainian men do not hold regular jobs, as otherwise they would be drafted and sent to the front. Many people survive thanks to unofficial work. So you got people running under the radar. They're living off the grid technologically. They moved out of their homes. They're hiding in the basement. They're living somewhere because they know that they're cannon fodder. They know that they are peasants that have been purchased with the land, and their only value is to go to the front and catch a couple of Russian bullets and some shrapnel with their bodies so that they can keep this thing going until at least the election. That's their job. And they know their job, and they're hiding because they don't want to do it. And you know what? Kind of don't blame them. Moreover, many Ukrainians in the diaspora are making all possible efforts to get rid of Ukrainian citizenship and ties to the country. Yeah, because if somebody wakes up one day, hey, you're a Ukrainian citizen, are you? They're like, well, you could possibly go back to Ukraine and fight for the liberation of your country. Nah, I'm not Ukrainian, right? He commented, the pro-U.S. concept of the new Ukrainian state is so unsustainable that it requires Ukrainians to constantly sacrifice their lives, health, and property, but without offering anything in return, and instead cutting social payments, close hospitals, schools, and businesses as part of the neoliberal course. Exactly. Because they were purchased as peasants along with the land. Look. When the landowner, the feudal landowner, bought that estate with the peasants, he wasn't building new things for the peasants. He wasn't building schools for the peasants. He wasn't raising the salaries of the peasants. No, the peasants' job was to work until they died and to have kids, hopefully as many as possible, so that you could keep this free gravy train going for the noble person that owned it. So the Ukrainians, their job is to die. The more the merrier, right? And people have to hide, and people outside of Ukraine are like, you think I'm going back to that hellhole? You got another thing coming, bro. I'm staying right here where I am in Canada, whatever, fill out the blank, right? And as he says, it's unsustainable. How long can you continue to simply use a country as a platform to go after Russia? At some point, the people in that platform are going to say, hey, what about us? Right? What about our lives? And the U.S. is like, yeah, what about your lives? Give them. They're ours. We own your lives. You give them. That's the concept. Look, what do you think Blinken went there strumming a guitar for? Blinken goes to Kiev and they're like, oh my God, our feudal lord is here. And they're like, yeah, we're losing cities all over the place. Our everything's being wiped out. What do you have to say? And Blinken's like, somebody give me my guitar. They're like, hey, our guys are being wiped out. All right. Oh, thank God I'm a country boy. Oh, sun's coming up and there's vittles on the grill. They're like, yeah, you're singing John Denver, for God's sake. Our people are getting killed. But actually, here's the thing. The people who were there with them were clapping. The people that were there were high-fiving. Yeah, bro, we're down. Because they understood. Look. We're living big. If you're in Kiev right now and you're sitting in a pizza joint, a high-class pizza joint with Tony Blinken, you're probably one of the oligarchs. You're one of the people who sold the peasants. You're not one of the peasants. Your son is in Berlin driving a Maserati. He ain't at the front catching a piece of freaking shrapnel from a Russian artillery round, right? So that people that were there understood the game, and they're part of the game, and they're willing to sell out their people in their country. They sold them. From their perspective, fair and square. I sold you the people. I sold you the peasants fair and square. You come here. We're not here to say what's wrong, what's right. We're just here to say, play a guitar, make it good, sing and dance, eat some pizza, and then leave. Because, hey, you bought these people. They're done. So this guy says, how do you view the war in Ukraine? He says, this is a civil war because of closeness of the two nations. Look. Think about this. That's what the U.S. does. The U.S. says, these Slavs, I want you to fight Slavs, right? The U.S. goes to, right now, Taiwan. They're Chinese people. U.S. recognized Taiwan as part of China. Hey, Taiwan, yeah, we want you to fight China. We want Chinese people to fight China. Hey, Korea, we want to set you up. We want Asian people to fight and kill other Asian people. We want Slavs to kill Slavs. We want Asian people to kill Asian people. It's always the same thing. Hey, we want a war between, we want to get, remember they were trying to build a Middle East NATO. We're going to bring the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia all together. Remember this? Saudi Arabia bombs Yemen. We want Muslims to kill Muslims. We want to go to Africa. We want Africans to kill Africa. That's always the game. What was the Nicaragua Sandinistas and the Contras about, right? The Sandinistas were basically the people. They kind of wanted a socialist government. If they wanted a socialist government, they had a right to whatever kind of government they want, right? As long as they choose it, it's theirs. But the U.S. said, no, you can't. You can only do what we tell you to do. So we're going to fund the Sandinistas, who were also Nicaraguans and a lot of indigenous. So what they did was you get indigenous South Americans to kill indigenous South Americans. People around the world got to wake up and realize that's the U.S. game. Slavs kill Slavs, Asians kill Asians, Africans kill Africans, Muslims kill Muslims, the South American, indigenous, Latino, whatever you want to call them, kill that. That's the game, to sit back here and to play the grand chessboard, to play the piano, and then you play the guitar while they die. And that's the game. So here's the bottom line. I think what we're looking at here is a situation. We're going to stop screen. Okay, I think we're looking at a situation wherein the game is kind of running out. Let me get rid of this. The game's kind of running out for the U.S. in a lot of places. And in Ukraine, what's happening is this, more so than anything else. If we're honest about it, they're running out of Ukrainians, right? As if you use people for cannon fodder, at some point you run out of cannon fodder. Now, and here's the obvious question. If you listen to some of my old videos way back, what would I say? I said, yeah, the Biden team's going to be like, hey, how we fix for Ukraine? You remember, I used to say this like a year and a half ago. How we fix for Ukrainians? We're almost out. Oh, my God, we're almost out of Ukrainians. Yeah, Romanians, Poles, maybe. We got some Frenchmen we can throw in there. Yeah, let me check. I think we got some. We'll throw them in the meat grinder next, right? It was let's fight till we run out of Ukrainians. We are almost out of Ukrainians. Okay. Fair enough. We knew at some point we'd be out of Ukrainians. What do we got next? Who's next to go into the meat grinder? Poles. They're Slavs, aren't they? Yeah, it's time for them to go in the meat grinder. How about Romanians? And even the French and the Brits, right? The French and the Brits are down with that. The French and the Brits are like, yeah, we might have to send people in. Now, they're not really going to send people in. They want to bait in. They're like, here's the game. The French and the Brits are like, we might have to send people in and we'll take the Ruskies out once and for all, right? Because they know that like the Baltic states are so friggin' Russia-hating stupid that they can just stoke that fire. And they can say, yeah, we might have to send troops in. We ain't sending troops in. And that like Lithuania and the Baltic postage stamp sized Baltic states who hate Russia will be like, yeah, we're in. We got 12 guys named Bob, and Bob. Get over here. You're going in to fight Ukrainians, right? So Lithuania, the Baltic states, they can put together a platoon amongst all of them, right? So they're going to put together their platoon, 25 guys or something to go in, and then they're going to pump their fist. Yeah, we put together a contingent of soldiers. Let's go in and beat how many guys? Let me count. 7. Move over. I can't see the other guy. 15, not 25, 30. Yeah, that's a pretty big contingent for our country. So we got 25 or 30 guys. They're going to go out and they're going to take them stupid Ruskies out. Right? And right behind us, the French and British, they're sending all kinds of people. They're behind us a second ago. Where the hell did the French and British go? French and British are, oh, buddy, they're sucking on tea. They're eating baguettes. They're cutting up pepperoni and cheese. And bad news, Lithuania and Romania and Poland, they ain't coming. The job works like this. Muslims kill Muslims. Asians kill Asians. Africans kill Africans. And Slavs and Eastern Europeans kill Slavs and Eastern Europeans. Your Slavs and Eastern Europeans understand what your job is. The UK ain't sending help. France ain't sending help, not to Eastern Europe. Your regions get stabilized, you get impoverished, and your people get massacred. Now, will they sue for peace at some point? Yeah, when they run out of Slavs. They're almost out of Ukrainians. So they're going to pump you up. Yes, sir, we're coming in. We're right behind you, Lithuania and Poland and Romania. We're coming in. But first, what we'd like you to do, because they're going to be like, hey, Macron and Sunak, when are you sending the people? Well, we're on the way. We're putting together our contingents, hundreds of thousands, millions of billions, trillions of soldiers. The Russians are going to get it now. But first, before we get there, while we're putting things together, we got a lot of work to do. We're building stuff, we're training people, we're ready. We got machetes that we're sticking in Russian dummies. Man, we're coming downhill at them Russians. But it's going to take us a few months to, get together, get everything together, iron everything down. So here's what we're going to do. If you could be so kind as to prep, our landing spots for us. If you could do the groundwork to set it up, we're coming. But first, we need the Romanians and the Poles and the Lithuanians to go in, right? Smack them stinking Ruskies around. Because look, let's face it, we know the Russians are intellectually inferior. They got nothing. Are you guys scared of shovels? The Russians are fighting with shovels, for God's sake. Right here at the Times of London, read this article. The Russians are fighting with shovels. Oh, it's done, right? So here's what we're going to do. While we're preparing our hundreds of thousands of battalions to march into Ukraine and to slaughter the Russians, to mow them down like cordwood. While we're planning that, first, we'd like you guys to get together, the 25, 30 guys, whatever the hell you got. The Poles, I think they can get together 50. And we want you to get those guys in, right? And we want you to go right down the middle down Broadway. We want you to make a big arrow and punch into the Russian army with a couple hundred guys. Punch right into the Russian army, cut through their lines, march to Moscow, put up the Lithuanian, Romanian, and Polish flag in Red Square, and we want you to physically grab the entire leadership of the Russian military and bring them back for us. At that point, we will then send our guys in, just as a mop-up operations. How's that sound? Now, of course, if you're in Lithuania and you're the president of Lithuania, it sounds great. Hey, what's that sound like? Awesome. We trust you guys. We know you'll be right behind us. And we'll be right behind you. All right, buddy. And then after the last Romanian dies, Lithuanian dies, the whole Baltic states, all of their young men have gone into the meat grinder. Poland sitting over there, their young men have gone to the meat grinder. Nothing but women left. The entire Eastern Europe is nothing but women, because all the men have been meat grinded. Then the West, you know what they'll do? The Western men will then run services. Hey, do you want an Eastern European bride? There's nothing but Eastern European brides everywhere. They're cheap. Get your European bride now. Go on your trip to Lithuania and blah, blah, blah. So you can meet Eastern European brides everywhere, because there ain't no men. Oh, by the way, at the point that There's no Eastern Europeans left. That the Russians, that they've all been thrown into the Russian meat grinder. They will then say, you know what, Russians, I think we need to start opening this friggin' pipeline up again, and we need to start doing some work. Now, the U.S. will say don't do it. There'll be changes of government in Europe. They'll like kind of, it'll be finish it off. So don't get me wrong. If it were up to the idiot leaders of Europe, I think they just march right into World War III. But I don't think it's that easy for them, because if they tried, I think a lot of the governments would just fall. The governments would fall. There is a contingency of people who are opposed to it, and that would just rise up and explode. So I think they would if they could. I always say if they could, they'd get away with it, they would. But I think the plan now, the obvious plan, is the cannon fodder contingency. Send in the Slavic cannon fodder until you run out of them. Because if you think about it, you probably got enough Eastern Europeans to last until they'll get you through the election, right? You got enough Eastern European cannon fodder to get past the election. That's all they're really trying to do, is get past the election. So, all right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Let me look and see before I go if we got any super chats, because I always answer the super chats. But if we don't, we won't. I ain't gonna worry about it. Not seeing any. If there is, I just want to make sure I answer anyone. Oh, here we go. I Am Legend Boxing says, people who think Ukraine can beat Russia never looked at a map. It would be like the United States versus California. Biden is now sliding them. Let's see. Ukraine is Russia's 26.5 times the size of Ukraine. Yeah, you are correct, sir. It takes a lot of propaganda to convince somebody that the army that defeated Hitler and Napoleon is going to fall to Zelensky. Yeah, right. Red chili pepper. Thanks. Let's keep going. All right. Thank you, everyone. I think that's it that I can think of. Any more articles? I will say this. Here's something interesting. Let me just touch base on this before we go. We'll make it short. So, New Caledonia, that's a French colonial island in the Pacific. And basically, in a nutshell, France is freaking out because the people want the hell out from under France. Apparently, what happened is France is trying to pass a law that, you got the people of New Caledonia and a bunch of French people and other people who have moved there. And the people there, like people all over the world, want their freedom from French colonialism, right? And France is changing the law so the people who move to New Caledonia can vote and have, vote in their elections, vote in their various. Let me make it a little clearer. So anyway, France wants, the French Parliament wants to make changes in New Caledonia's constitution that would give greater rights to French residents living on the islands, right? And so you've got the proposed changes to the constitution would add thousands of extra voters to New Caledonia's electoral rolls. Okay, so what they're saying is basically, they want to change the law so that the French people who are there can vote. More French people can vote, and then basically what they want to do is this: New Caledonia, like so many other countries around the world, wants independence, and they want to change the laws so that they can quell that hunger for independence in New Caledonia, which is like off the coast of Australia, down that way. And here's the thing about it: isn't it, again, we see the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy wherein the U.S. says we recognize Taiwan as part of China, but Taiwan wants independence, so China can't absorb Taiwan, can't unify with Taiwan because Taiwan wants and deserves independence, right? Okay. But Overwhelmingly, the people in Taiwan, the numbers say that they don't want an independence movement because they know it threatens their security. Okay. Meanwhile, in New Caledonia, the New Caledonians, if that's the right word, actually want independence. Pretty much, it's the people there, the indigenous people there, like, we want freedom from the French, right? Not a people. The U.S. doesn't say, well, hey, just like Taiwan, they want independence and democracy and sovereignty. We got to give it to them. It's like mum's the word. They're going to back France. The world sees that, particularly the global South, the African countries, the Muslim countries, the Asian countries. They all see that, and they realize something. Your support for democracy is contingent upon your geostrategical needs. If it benefits you, you're all for democracy and independence and sovereignty. If it doesn't, you'll literally overthrow the government and kill everybody and put in a puppet dictator. The world knows it. The world sees it. It's just another example of it. So I think the New Caledonia uprising is interesting. And it's interesting that people are there, they're burning it down, right? They're raising hell. They're like, we're not going to have it anymore. What does a country do when the people what does a colonial power do when the people in the colony says, no, no more, no more? That's what's happening in Israel. It's the U.S. is a colonial power. It's got a front group, in my opinion, which is the Zionist Israel. And the people there are pushing back against settler colonialism. And the U.S. empire is utilizing brutal, genocidal tactics to put down the locals, the indigenous people, who simply want sovereignty and freedom. And that's what people are upset about. And they want to make it about Hamas because that pushes us away from an intellectual, philosophical discussion about who has the right to that land historically, about if you're supporting democracy and freedom, how does that apply to the indigenous inhabitants of Palestine, right? And how does even democracy apply to Israel? You're saying we support democracy, but you're supporting a theocracy. That is anti-democratic. That says about half the people are Palestinian, whatever, about half the people are Israeli, but we're going to support a system wherein the Israelis have all the rights and the Palestinians have none, and the Israelis can utilize brutal methods to subject the Palestinians to their needs and wants. So again, the hypocrisy of empire. This is the hypocrisy of empire. The hypocrisy that the U.S. says, here's what's interesting. We support democracy and the free market system. This is what the U.S. says. We support democracy and the free market system, right? Meanwhile, they're trying to throw Trump. The incumbent party is trying to jail its leading opposition figure who is actually leading in the polls, but they support democracy. Meanwhile, Ukraine ain't a democracy. I mean, on and on and on. They don't. So the U.S. says we support democracy, but we don't practice it. The U.S. says you have to go to this free market neoliberal. They literally went to China and said this free market neoliberal capitalist system that we have, right? Neoliberalism. You got to do it. But, oh, and might I add one other thing? They said we promote democracy, but the Americans don't have democracy anymore. It's an oligarchy. They said we support. The world needs to do neoliberal capitalism. That's the best system possible. Is neoliberalism, neoliberal capitalism. That's the best system ever. China, you need to do it. Russia, you need to do it. Everybody else, you need to do it. But the United States is racked by homelessness, racked by crime, racked by poverty and desperation. Might I add, all of those things go together. You will notice something about crime. That whenever there's poverty and desperation, crime goes up. I remember when I was in law enforcement, somewhere in around 2000, early 2000s, I was involved in this big forum and they were talking about crime going up and going down and when it was. And I said, look, I brought in a chart. I said, here's the economy. Look at this. When the economy increases, when the economy is strong, crime always goes down. The numbers are there. When the economy is weaker, crime goes up. There are crimes of desperation. I will guarantee you this. If you look at drug use and addiction and things like that, when people get desperate, there are crimes of desperation, and drug and destitution and drugs and addiction and alcohol go up when people don't have any outlet. They don't have any way to deal with the pain and the suffering. Their future is taken from them. Their present is taken from them. People act like you can, well, we'll just add more police and we'll just beat the pound heads and we'll just use authority to force people not to commit crime. There's too many people. You can't do that. And you have to first, if you're going to stop crime, you got to understand where it comes from. If you lower, I used to say when I was in law enforcement, it's a very, very rare thing for me to arrest a guy that's got a bachelor's degree and a college degree. It didn't happen a lot. I arrested a lot of poor people. Not that I went out and I just said, hey, a poor person. I'm talking about, for instance, when we got this crime group and they were stealing boats and outboard motors. We live near the water. And so Chesapeake Bay, they were going to people's backyards, stealing a little outboard motor, stealing a little 14-foot John boat, stealing a jet ski out of there, right? And they had this garage full of stuff. All this stolen stuff went there. Well, all of them were high school dropouts. All of them came from poor backgrounds. Go interview people in prison, interview people in jail. You'll find people with the worst, horrifying stories. It makes you feel sorry for them when you start going to prisons and jails and start interviewing people. When you hear their stories, you're not going to hear, well, yes, we lived in a great house with a white picket fence. My dad was a lawyer. Mom was a teacher, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yes, every day we had a dog and this and that. No, you're going to hear parents were addicts. Parents were, teenage mothers that were addicted to this and that and blah, 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 that they were impoverished, they were abused, they were horrible and poor backgrounds. You're not going to find people. Do you see that on occasion? Yes, you do. But for the most part, there are people whose lives have been a living hell, and they end up out of pain, emotional pain. They are self-medicating with drugs from emotional pain, trying to find an escape from the horror and pain that they feel. You don't have anything and they don't care and they got nothing to lose, and they're revolting against the society that threw them under the bus 40 years ago. And now what we're seeing is there are more and more people in that category. There's just more people in that category. So you're going to see more crime. But yet the U.S. is going to go around and tell everybody you should live with our system. You should use our system when we don't even execute the system of democracy, and our free market, a financialized system doesn't work for anybody but a select few. At any rate, I'm rattling on long enough. Thanks a lot, you all. A couple of things, and that is, if you can afford it, PayPal, buy me a coffee, Cash App, you name it. Certainly it would be appreciated. Anything you could do to help the channel. Follow me at rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. As you probably know by now, if you've been watching my show, Rockfin does not doesn't play any advertisements. That's why a lot of people like it. But the way it stays in is you can do, they do some pay-per-view stuff, but they have, you can become a member if you choose, and it's $14.99 a month. So if you can afford that, that's highly appreciated. If you can't, just keep the money for your family. That's fine. Make sure that you share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, everybody. Talk to you soon. I'm out.